Hey everyone, and welcome to the next set of videos. Today we'll be talking a bit about Rmarkdown, or this week we'll focus about Rmarkdown. And in this video, I'll tell you a bit about the Rmarkdown package system. So there's like all sorts of packages that exist around Rmarkdown to make your life easier, to allow you to do other things with Rmarkdown. And in this video, I'll just give you like a global overview, you could say, and then in the session itself, we'll get much more specific and maybe like try one or two of these packages. So first, to start off, we also talk briefly about the basics of Rmarkdown and what kind of packages even make Rmarkdown work, because it's not just one. So looking at Rmarkdown in a bit more detail, there's another package called Knitter, which really also does a lot of the heavy lifting around Rmarkdown. So when rendering a single RMD, there's always like multiple packages and pieces of software involved. It even goes beyond R packages. So if you look at this figure I created, it's kind of intended to give you a bit of an overview of which packages do which. It's just, I think, sometimes really helpful if you're kind of searching or trying to debug problems, where to look. So first, we kind of have our RMD. This is what we start off with. This is what we write, where we write our own like prose text and also some R code to be executed. And then usually in Rmarkdown, we just click the knit button and it does everything. And in the end, you end up with like your HTML or PDF file. But actually, and if you if you look at the output after clicking knit and like it gives you like in this console, like all this stuff happening, you can see that there's like two steps involved. So first, Knitter will create a Markdown document, and what Knitter does is it executes all the R code, takes the output, and puts it next to the text into one single document, and that's a Markdown document. So it's going to run all your R code, replace it with the outputs of the R code, sometimes retaining the R code or not. This is depending on the options you choose, and in the end, it will create this one Markdown file with the text and output side by side. And this is all that Knitter actually does. And then from here, there's another software called Pandoc, which you actually don't see that much of, and this is all installed by default when you install Rmarkdown. But what Pandoc does is, and it's not even written in R, it's like a completely different software, but it can turn Markdown documents into all sorts of other documents. It kind of does a lot of document conversion. And the way we use it here is that we use it to get from these Markdown documents to, for example, PDF, HTML, docx for Word, and many others. There's actually even more supported final product formats or whatever you want to call it. And then what Rmarkdown does, it just kind of abstracts away all this stuff happening. So it just sits on top of this and just runs Knitter and Pandoc at the same time, or one after each other. So that you don't have to know all this nitty-gritty stuff. But it still sometimes really comes in handy if you're trying to debug something, because certain things, kind of the high-level document stuff, is happening in Rmarkdown, and you need to look at the Rmarkdown documentation if you want to, for example, have a new kind of output format. Like if you want to, there's, for example, the option to specifically render specific types of Markdown or something out of your RMD. And for all these sorts of like things, or if you have some weird issues with your tables or something, you probably also want to look at Pandoc. And also, I mean, there's a bit more even going on, especially if you convert to PDF, but we'll not like focus on that too much. But I still think it's like really helpful to get this overview, to have an idea of how actually our Markdown works, and that also Knitter is its own kind of package. And so, for example, the cable function we've used to create nice output tables in our RMDs, that's also like part of the Knitter package, not actually of our Markdown, which you've seen, of course, because we kind of use Knitter cable to call it. And to continue, that's just a nicer write-up I did kind of these things. So first, Knitter executes the code and converts the RMD to MD. Then Pandoc, which is the next step, converts the Markdown into the final format that can be PDF, HTML, and many, many more. But these are usually the ones we're like mainly using, and our Markdown just kind of sits on top. And now onto like some other packages that exist in the Rmarkdown ecosystem. I think this can be really helpful to just know that these exist, and who knows, maybe one day you'll rely on one and it can be like super, super helpful. First one is Bookdown, and this allows you to actually write books in Rmarkdown. And quite a few of the books, also for example, the Using R for Data Science is a really famous book. These are all written in Bookdown actually, because it makes it really convenient and easy to write R-focused books, because you can just have your code and your actual book text side by side. And what it kind of does under the hood is that it just allows you to combine multiple Rmarkdown files into one larger document. And what you typically do is have kind of one Rmarkdown per chapter. Or for example, I think for my master's thesis as well, I in the end relied on Bookdown, which was a lot of pages. So you can kind of split up maybe your introduction, methods, results, and conclusion into separate files so they don't become so huge. And then you just run this one Bookdown command in the end to create one huge PDF. And it also supports multiple output formats, similar to Pandoc, because of course it just uses it under the hood. And also Bookdown and Rmarkdown, right? These are all kind of related. But most important, of course, PDF usually. Also LaTeX, which can be helpful in case you need to submit, sometimes for like certain journals or like publishers, they want a text file. And then having this as like an output format can also be really helpful. And in the end, all the PDF conversion anyways happens via LaTeX. So usually then it just goes to LaTeX and then to PDF. And if you want to learn more about this, you can also read the official Bookdown book, which of course was written in Bookdown. So you can see if you use Bookdown, you can also generate a website version of your book. And this might seem familiar, like just this layout and everything, because there's like really a bunch of Bookdown books floating around in the world. Yeah, so that much for Bookdown. Continuing with websites, there's also Blogdown. And well, I mean, the name kind of suggests that this is mainly for writing blogs, which is really, really helpful for. It can also render complete websites, which I think is a bit like, yeah, more flexible use case, of course. And the way this really adds some features, because of course also in Rmarkdown just by itself you can generate an HTML website, but I mean it's a single page, so not that interesting for like a full website or something. So the nice thing that you can do with Blogdown is create more complicated websites. So for example, the Tidy Models website has been made with Blogdown. Tidy Models is it's kind of the tidyverse equivalent for modeling and machine learning. We'll also briefly look into it in this course. And yeah, just wanted to show that like this quite beautiful and like nice websites can easily be generated with Blogdown. And of course, all these packages typically also come with like ready-made templates. You can adjust it if you have like specific needs, but it's really just amazing to be able to just use like a standard template and it already looks good without having to do much more work. Then the next one is a bit more focused on articles themselves, or like shorter pieces. So both of these packages, Articles and Distill, they're called, allow you to write academic publications in Rmarkdown with like some really nice layouting and yeah, to just make it look professional. And the big benefit of this is that if you write your articles already in Rmarkdown, you can easily combine the analyses, the results, and the actual prose of like what your normal text that you're writing into just one document. And this is of course really amazing for reproducibility. It allows you to iterate a bit on the document. So for example, if you have some last minute data changes, you can just swap in and out the data and most of the stuff should just work, which can be also really nice. And if you have a reader and you publish your Rmarkdown as well, they can just follow along really easily with your analyses, right? They can just look in the actual text and see the text side by side with the what was I about to say? With the analysis and the description of what's happening. Sorry. And the first package, Articles, that I'm naming here, is really helpful because it provides many journal templates. So if you ever need to submit to a specific journal, or you need like maybe like a standard format for your thesis, which is probably maybe right now more interesting. Like many of these journal templates also just look really cool for like a thesis or like maybe that term paper that you have to hand in. So for these cases, having like a template package can be really, really nice. So articles is your friend here. So if here, for example, you can see one template or like another one from PLOS. So these are already matched to certain publishers, and I think, for example, also the Elsevier has a nice template, despite of course the company maybe being a bit sketchy with their like high journal fees and everything. But yeah, I'm not going to go down that road. And another really interesting package is Distill. So this was actually developed at RStudio, if I remember correctly. We're now called Posit, and it was intended as a very opinionated template for kind of creating modern, nice-looking publications aimed for the web. So this is actually an HTML template, but it looks really neat. So if you write up an analysis, you can maybe just use it. And I don't know, just if you look at the template, I feel like it has a really nice look to it. And it has these like, for example, the table of contents, which will I think like scroll with you to a certain degree. Like it just looks really nice and well organized. And if you create an HTML report anyways with your Rmarkdown, I think this is a great package to be using to create really good looking and convincing and professionally looking, of course, as well, because these things do matter. If you share your reports, you want them to look good. Outcome in the end. Next up, moving a bit further away from publications and like, how would you say, like stuff you would print or something, and moving on to slides, so presentations. And there's also almost its own ecosystem just of like packages for presentation creation in Rmarkdown. I think this is really something to think about quite well. For some things, this works quite well. And then I feel for other topics, it just doesn't work that well, right? Like sometimes PowerPoint or slides or something, or like the open free alternatives to them can be a bit nicer to create a presentation just because you can drag stuff around and it's like more what you see is what you get. But for certain things, or like if you actually need to generate presentations multiple times, then of course suddenly using Rmarkdown really shines. And there's a few packages all at the front, Xaringan, which allow you to create nice and cool looking slideshows and presentations. And the other package, Reveal.js. So whenever all these packages I have in this like curly bracket, have the names in the curly brackets. Reveal.js actually creates web-based presentations for you. So it's going to create an HTML file with some JavaScript to kind of make a neat presentation. Then you can have like side things animating in and everything. So it can be really quite nice. And especially, of course, if you need to generate something, if you need to generate like a long list of things, or sometimes it's also, or maybe you want to just look at lots of big plots or something for your exploratory data analysis. And then it can be really nice to just generate them as a presentation. Just saying that like, you shouldn't always, like, just, I think it's good to be mindful of for which use cases you use these kind of packages, and from which use cases maybe it's just nicer to create a presentation by hand. So what they allow you to do is to easily create slideshows using Rmarkdown. And this is some examples of how they can look. Here's like a Xaringan presentation with some slides. And then new slides are just automatically created for each heading that you add to the document. So usually by default, I think it's for every level 1 or level 2 heading. So that's why you see these hashtags there. But you can also use dividers, so just like a bunch of dashes to create manual slide breaks, one might say. And then just gonna kind of create all the typesetting and everything by default. So really nice as well. And you can save everything in different formats. So actually Xaringan and Reveal.js, IO slides and Slidey, it's all different packages, support outputting to HTML, or at least different output formats, sorry. And you can also create PDF slides using Beamer, and you can even create PowerPoint slides. But a slight caveat here, like I feel creating PowerPoint slides from Rmarkdown is a bit of like the worst of both worlds. So you should really be careful. I think you can also use templates from PowerPoint, but then usually, I don't know, it's a bit tricky to get like into a really nice format. So not sure I would really suggest this. And just to give you some more inspiration, so this is a Reveal.js presentation, if I recall correctly, and you can also have like big plots in there, it's really lovely and very flexible. So definitely for many use cases, it can be like amazing. And then last, going kind of back to the beginning and talking about knitter. So we talked about the knitter cable, right? And there's also a matching package called Cable Extra, which adds a few more formatting options for knitter. So because of course, formatting tables can be actually quite tricky just because there's so much you can do and it's hard to specify, especially when you generate them from data, which is usually what you want to do, right? You don't want to also like copy paste everything by hand. But in between can be a bit tricky, and especially if you want stuff like ready for publication in your thesis or something, it can be really helpful to have the Cable Extra package around. And it just ties in really nicely with the knitter cable function that already comes included. And here you see, so you can have some further customization with it. And this is also something we'll definitely cover in class. We'll like go a bit more into detail how to create like a nice looking table, because it's just going to come in handy, and eventually you will want to generate these. You will want to generate tables, and then you might as well generate nice tables. And it also supports different output formats, so either to PDF via LaTeX or to HTML. And as this ties in with knitter anyways, it also can auto detects. So usually you end up with nice tables regardless of the final format, except if you try to generate like a Word file. Usually that kind of goes weirdly, just as a heads up. And then lastly, there's an example. So this is how like your tables can look. So these things that like you have some joined headings or something, that there's some things are written in bold, all this kind of formatting you can really nicely do with Cable Extra. Also to highlight certain rows, as you can see here, that we have some highlighted in black. I mean, this one is really going funky. But I mean, just so you know, you can do all these things. Whether you should, I guess, is a different question, but I'm sure you guys will all have like a good judgment of that. And last, there's also another package, and I don't think we'll have the time to get into this one in much detail, but there's the GT package. I mean, really, really cool looking logo, I feel. So of course we need to add that as well, just to give it the shout out. I don't think we'll be able to go into much detail here, just because I feel like it's also very different from the knitter ecosystem. But with the GT table, what they actually tried is kind of to create a grammar of tables. So similar to how we have the grammar of graphics in ggplot, this package created its own grammar of tables. And it's really, really cool. There's some downsides, I feel, just because it doesn't work that well with like default R output. So the tables sometimes like then they would render in your HTML viewer, which can be fine, but also sometimes it's a bit annoying. Or like if you want to create like a PNG, like a picture of the table, it can be kind of weirdly hard to do that, just because it generates usually HTML tables. So just as a heads up, but I mean, it's a really, really powerful package. Comes with a lot of documentation and many, many functions. So if you really need like specific table setups, this is your way, the way to go. And that's it for this video. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. And here just briefly the information on where the graphics are coming from. See you.